Hello, can you hear me? Yes? Okay, I'm so glad you're all here. Thank you, Bonnie, for that welcome. Whenever I come to here, I always bring my bicycle, and I always ride my bicycle. So I feel sad that I don't have my bicycle with me. So I'm going to read something, a new essay. It's forthcoming in a journal. And I need your help because I had to do a bunch of edits from the editor. And one of the edits the editor wanted me to do is change the title. So I don't have a title. And so after the reading, I have a quiz, and I want you to come up with a better title for me. And then I also have 2 questions that I need help with. In the essay, I referred to actual physical places. One of them is a bike workshop in Lincoln that helps you fix old bicycles. And then the other one is a museum of bicycles in Ohio. And I'm not sure, and the editor has gone back and forth with me about this, if I should name them or not name them. So I need your help with that too, if you could help me. Okay? Okay. All right, I'll just read it. Okay. So the title right now, which is not going to be the title because you will help me, is called A Suburban Project. Under the ash trees, I wait beside my dad's storage shed. His garage full of Schwinn's, bicycle parts and antiques, like a 1900s bike bell adorned with an American flag. I strike it sometimes to sound its peal, like I touch other objects there, rotary phones, push mowers, ball mason jars lined up like trophies earned on a shelf, transporting me to the past for which he digs, scavenges curbs, or walks old city fills. Why does time shift in my dad's presence? Breweries long diminished spring up along the Des Moines River again. Interstate bypasses return to roads, and below as skyscrapers reach, the city's skyline shrinks to tranquil stories. It's the 1880s bicycle frenzy, when my great-great-great-grandmother spoke before Iowa legislators on the educational necessities of handicrafts. It's the Second War, when my grandpa, too young to serve, salvaged parts from the city dump to build motorbikes from the frames of Hawthorns. It's 1973, when my dad commuted to his part-time job as a lifeguard on a Schwinn Collegiate, his curls glinting with sun. If his mustache has grown hoary, I still only see Dad, one who finds what's old to save it, mending what requires repairs, even old bicycles. Before driving over for a weekend ride, I called to tell him about Olympia, my girlhood 10-speed Huffy. After sitting in the garage for years, friends helped me make her rideable again. I asked him, "Do you have another old bike I might try to fix?" "Well," he said, "I don't know, kiddo. I might." Now my dad hands me dresser drawers to stack on the flagstone. He rolls out a radio flyer wagon to park on the sidewalk. He pulls out what he calls the largest shovel in the world to lean slant to the roof. "Have a look at that," he says. At the shed door, I lean towards the nubby tires of a 1980s BMX, then say, "I'm looking for a cruiser, something for errands." Olympia was a perfect commuter for the girl I was. Now she's great for the mile rides to the gym, but I need what could carry groceries. Against the garage rests a bicycle with balloon tires. It's a woman's bicycle from before the war. I climb the stones, then brush away leaves. He says, "Get down from there. They don't even make tires like that anymore." I tilt the bike towards me. The cracked rubber flattens. Then I wait at the shed door. He hands out more objects to get to the bicycles. The air fills with the dust of what's inside. Oh boy. Okay, so my husband printed these for me at work because I have a printer, and so I do apologize, but it looks like the printer cut off a couple sentences on the bottom of each page. So we will just assume that these words are not needed. Okay, it's like a very good edit. Like we're just going to cut out these things. They're just, and I will ad-lib. Oh, okay, I apologize. Okay, so the air fills with dust. I cross the threshold, wedged between crates, planks of wood, and a rocking chair. A green Schwinn Peaks, all fenders, cruiser bars, and stem shifters. The light drifts with gold. Can I try to fix this one, I say? He says, you can have that, Schwinn. Have? I reach around, tracing the pattern on the leather seat. It's so cool. Come on out of there. I've got a few more things to move. Soon, in the driveway, I wipe away cobwebs to reveal gilded detail on the frame, a Schwinn plate, and silver seat buttons. But spokes are missing or snapped. Split with cracks, the front tire fills, but the back one lacks a valve. I step over to check bike fit. Through the grime, one word hovers ghost-like in the green. I buff it until it glimmers. Suburban, I say. My chow mix Echo trots over, then nudges me with her patchy nose. Patting her flank, I say, a Suburban Schwinn. My dad's dog, Jimmy the pup, wiggles between us. I pet them in turn, then whisper, he's a Suburban. In the shed, my dad returns the last of the objects. But beside the door, I imagine he's kept out some project. Maybe it's something he's been meaning to fix. Or maybe it's the thing he was really after, hidden behind this bicycle I get to take home. Or maybe it's something he'd forgotten he had, but finding it as he searched to give me what I sought, he discovered something that he'd been seeking himself. So now we're gonna go to the workshop. The Lincoln Bike Kitchen opens hangar-like, spilling bikes from the bay. On a bench, a woman wrapped in a headscarf waits with 3 girls. A volunteer bike mechanic in a black apron spins a wheel. Another aligns a seat, and a third holds a clipboard with forms for programs, like the Mobile Bicycle Kitchen. Children's bikes stand sassy or tough under a maple. Inside, more bikes drift on racks, float tethered on hooks, or line up on the loft. Classic rock bounces through the air. Welcoming all, places like this exist everywhere, in Omaha and in my hometown of Des Moines, with a variation on the central theme, getting more people on bicycles. Accompanied by a parent or a guardian, local kids can pick a donated bike for free. After 10 hours of service, a volunteer can select a bike and refurbish it while they learn basic bicycle maintenance skills. Bicycle tinkerers or newbies, commuters or pleasure riders can all enter this workshop, carrying or rolling what they seek to make roadworthy. Bike mechanics answer questions, guide unskilled hands, explain which tools or how. The Suburban's back tire flaps against the pavement as I push, then grinds as it threatens to topple. The new gum wall tires release an odor as it jostles against my chest. Under my arm, the box corners of a new tube dig. Several yards ahead, my friend moves quickly, seeking an unoccupied workstation. I struggle up the driveway, then once inside, my friend hoists the bicycle onto a stand. Can you get the back wheel off? I can try, I say. This summer, I decided to, this is where the ad lib has to be. Okay, so this summer, it says in here in my mind, it does on the paper. This summer, my project was to get to know my bicycles, and I began by changing my first tire, then cleaned my first chain. I pulled Olympia from a dusty hook in the garage, called up my friend who took her to this bike workshop. I watched them disappear down the road, her frame on the rack, her parts in the back seat. But when she was returned, I completed the final task, adding a taller seat post, reflectors, and lights. If repairing Olympia wasn't a fluke, do I belong in a space like this, working on the Suburban? I struggle with the bolts by hand, then try a wrench, but the 1970 version of what has become the quick release remains frozen. I abandon the wrench to prepare a space for removed parts. Then with a rag, I look for dust. Tailing a mechanic, my friend asks how to replace missing spokes. I lean towards their conversation that flows like surf, a tumble of what's incomprehensible mixed with words I know. My friend returns, then works the bolt free. The Suburban's parts amass, tire, tube, rim liner. Then my friend disappears, wheel in hand, for advice on removing the cassette. I sag. Other than mechanics assisting families or those with questions, everyone tends to their projects. Their skilled hands move like dancers, like the hands of my grandpa, like the hands of my dad. The rag trembles in my own as the overhead lights buzz. Without the wheel, the bike appears off kilter, over heavy and ready to tip. But when nudged, it holds. As a girl, I was always assigned a task. Would my dad tell me to do this now? Under the Suburban's fender, I swipe. A thick swag of dust falls. Spare parts flow across the workshop like a kid's bedroom of toys. The rag works as I scan the space like a Where's Waldo's book to identify a piece, then try to decide which barrel, shelf, or hook to which it belongs. A blue barrel teems with handlebars. Others overflow with pedals, shifters, and cranks. Rims wash from truing stations in a cascade. Wheels sway on walls. A box fan whirls the scent of grease, metal, and sweat. Settling into the rhythm of work, the Suburban vibrates as if he's here to help. Stopping in the nearby aisle, a mechanic holds a bicycle steady for a boy. His mom watches. The boy says, "Can we look up there?" and points towards the loft, like it's a treehouse of bicycles begging to be climbed. He says, "I don't know of a 20-inch up there. Let's try this one." The boy sits, then squeezes the grips on a red bike as the mechanic checks fit. "I think you might need a 22-inch. They walk towards the front. Then the mother whispers to me his bike was stolen. She joins the pursuit. Another family passes. In a flow of brilliant skirts, the mother leads the search as the father tails, hands clasped behind his back. Between them, their daughter's voices lilt with melody, eyes luminous with the sparkle of so many bicycles. They hold chins, whispering, their bobs lift, swinging to follow where one directs. I wonder what their bike's purpose will be. A commuter for school, to twirl around the neighborhood in a biker gang of girls, or perhaps for the eldest, her commuter to her first part-time job. My friend disappears and asks more questions to the mechanic, who tells us which tools. My arms ache with the effort of cleaning, but my shoulders begin to relax. When the shop closes at dusk, I wheel the Suburban into the street, tires full and wheel trued. He needs more work, but I pull him towards me anyway. The cruiser's bars open wide. I hold them without hesitation, like joining hands with a forgotten friend. I push off. For a few seconds, the buzz of the city vanishes into the timeless song of insects, crooning us back to 1973, a place without the demands I know, but where my dad and grandpa once pedaled. As I head home, I wonder, do objects teleport us to other times? So then I'm going to skip this section. It's a short section about riding the bicycle and the seat. It was like, the seat was like held in place by a bicycle, like a belt that was cracked in leather, and so it was like looped through the seat stays, and it was like kind of holding it steady, but as soon as I sat on it and like kind of hit a hill, it went like this, and then I couldn't get it to stay. So you know how hard it is to ride a bicycle when your bicycle seat is doing this? Okay. So then I get back home and I'm like, gosh, I have to do something. So I set up a bicycle garage and kind of organized all my tools. Okay. I sweat over my maintenance checklist. Echo pokes her nose into the dog door, sliding through the flap. When my hands shake over some minor adjustment, she ducks back out. When I hoot, she bounds through, wiggling orange fur to paw at the empty bowls. Sliding pliers into my pocket, I push the Suburban into the driveway for a grocery run, my backpack deflated against my back. I pedal slow, avoiding the front brakes that squeal with any pressure, bump, or turn. Am I ready for this maiden journey? After climbing the first hill, the caliper tilts, then a brake pad groans along the rim. Without stopping, I lean forward, reach over the handlebars to the caliper. It realigns under my fingers, but as soon as I get going again, it starts to scream. I reach over and readjust. When the bicycle purrs against the road, I relax. After a speed bump, the yelling begins anew. My legs burn. People glance towards our progress, then look away. One man stops, places his fists on his hips, and gapes. Any quiet is short-lived. The bike just shrieks. I tremble, gripping the bars. Is this how parents feel with a raging toddler? I lock the Suburban to the groceries bicycle rack, then enter the cool air of the store. At the till, the dark-eyed cashier burbles as I build my backpack. Echo's kibble takes up most of the space, but as I slide everything into my backpack, the straps seem to accommodate the bulk. I ride. For 2 miles, people stare from every stoplight, street, sidewalk, or porch. I look straight ahead as the bag presses against me. It's a struggle to pedal with the weight, but I let the bike just yell. After dinner, the pages of my books flutter through my fingers, highlighted like abstract paintings. I study my hands, bony, freckled, and scuffed. Am I even strong enough? I drag the bike stand into the light. Adjusting the arm and clasp, I shake as I try to hoist the Suburban up, but the wheels refuse to clear the floor. Sweating, I turn to the original Schwinn catalog online. If correct, the Suburban weighs more than Echo or Olympia. My friend arrives. Echo joins us, dog-talking, then presses her flank into shins and hands. I explain what I want to do, then bring the bathroom scale outside to the garage. Step on the scale, I say. Now step on it again, but this time, hold a bicycle. I tried this once before, weighing only Olympia, but now we weigh each bicycle, recording the figures. When we're finished, I subtract my friend's weight to find theirs. Lexa, 25, the Hybrid, 33, Olympia, 36, the Suburban, 40. I report the findings. 40 pounds? My friend says, then whistles. That is one heavy bike. You want to put a basket on that? It's a men's bike, I say, collapsing into a folding chair. Is he too heavy to hold groceries? Wait. Didn't you just go to the grocery store? I nod, burying my face in my hands as I whimper out each detail. My friend keeps interrupting with, stop, you're kidding, and no. So the heat begins to transform into a fit of giggles. Lifting the Suburban onto the stand, my friend collects the needed tools. For several minutes, I simply watch the shifters, brakes, and seat come into alignment, then the lubing of the jockey wheel, chain, and crank. Am I really this useless with bicycles? Tightening my ponytail and pushing up my sleeves, I gather my own tools. Degreaser, brushes, and sponge to bring the Suburban to the polish he deserves. Dirt lifts from every crevice, every piece of chrome, murk from the fenders melts. The shifters transform from a yellow miasma to silver, rivaling a mirror. It distorts my reflection, but I'm definitely there. Okay. I'm going to jump ahead to the last section. So the next two sections are we go on a bike ride, I go back with some friends, we do shopping, we get ice cream. I stop by my dad's house on Thanksgiving and sit on all his bicycles and clean a bunch of his bicycles. And that's super fun. And then we go to the Bicycle Museum in Ohio. It's $3, the woman says inside the entrance to the Bicycle Museum of America. My friend and I produce the fee from our wallet. There's a short orientation video. Would you like me to start it for you? We nod, then take our seat as the lights dim. The video is a recording of an exhibition that demonstrates old-fashioned machines pedaled by people in period clothing. The camera pans the audience watching the riders wheel across the plaza. An announcer explains the machine that led towards the invention of the bicycle, all types of human-powered wheeled machines that came before, and many that came after. Then, with brochure in hand, I enter the museum's first room. Like those in the video, the first exhibit, the dressine, is from our past, a machine that moves by a rider's feet, propelling from the ground. I've studied it in books, but now I reach for it, caressing the tire and seats. My friend looks away as the staff passes to turn off the video, but though she seems to glance towards my hands that hold the wooden handlebars, she goes about her task, then returns to her post by the museum door. I lean towards my friend, whispering, "Maybe it's a discovery zone." But my friend says, pointing towards the red rope that loops between each gold post, separating the aisles from the displays. I reach again for the dressine, then squeeze. My friend sighs, hands in pockets. But my hands delight over each old-fashioned ride. Handlebars, brake grips, spokes, grills, over chain rings made to save a skirt. Tires astonish. Cranks, gear ratios, design flourishes, frames of wood or metal. One set of rims features 2-inch studs to roll across ice. Under display lights, all manner of bike gear glint, lights, bells, medals, cups, hand warmers, even a squirt gun to aim at chasing dogs. After wending through 2 rooms, I grasp my friend's arm, then point. A sign invites one to pedal a high wheeler mounted on a platform. "You first." I hesitate as I overhear people entering the museum, then disappear to the film. Daylight filters through the storefront windows to the high wheeler's dark body. It towers on the platform. During the bicycle craze of the 19th and early 20th century, cyclists raced them, completed century rides, and even pedaled cross-country, documenting their travel tales in lectures, columns, and books. Months into the future, and I don't even know this yet, on the annual week-long bicycle ride across Iowa, RAGBRAI, I will see a man ride one, pedaling among 20,000 other cyclists biking the 400 miles from the Missouri to the Mississippi River. "Okay," I say now, hands shaking as I step onto the platform. "I will go first, but you must go after." I climb up and ride. After my friend gives it a whirl, we take the stairs to the second floor, arriving finally in the room of Huppies and Schwinns. If my dad gave me Olympia, then the Suburban, he's also given me this quirky permission to find such kin wherever they're found, inside books, at workshops, or in museums where they're dusted regularly by reverent hands. The first bike in the final room is a Schwinn. It's a woman's bicycle. It's called the World. I stop in the center of the room where 2 wheeled machines wait. I flip the brochure seeking them, but a listing isn't there. I approach the first. It's a big green convertible with paddle boat-like pedals inside. I think of Fred Flintstone's feet spinning dust, but then find a tag dangling from the driver's side mirror. It says, "Try me." I bugle at this Alice in Wonderland invitation, then climb in to try. The gears rumble with the weight. My friend spins towards me, then gasps as if my touching of bicycles has simply gone too far. "It's like a big wheel," I say, laughing as I pedal a slow revolution towards my friend's agog stance. "It says, 'Try me.'" I show the tag, then step out, holding the door wide. "Your turn." My friend checks it. "You get on the other side." Not a chance. With my constant nudge from behind, my friend lumbers forward. I think the power steering is out. I stop beside the other machine. "What is this?" I ask. "It looks like what the video called an Ingo bike. It's a scooter-like with an off-center rear hub. Nowhere is a try me tag, but my friend steps from the car and onto the scooter, then propels it by a rhythmic bounce around the room. You've got to time it just right. Almost like Mickey Mouse or the Three Stooges, the wheels' motions blur, cartoon-like under the wide fender. They whirl across the polished floor. Holding the bike out with a slight pant, my friend says, "Your turn." I push off, adjusting to the lift and drop of the hub. Bounce on the drop. As I pick up speed, bikes blur around me. Those on the wall and floor, those way up in the air. I could be anywhere, in any time. I could be standing at my dad's, dusty bikes lined up like a fleet, at the local bike workshop among so many trying to learn, or on my way home from a grocery run, basket full. But instead, I'm here, exactly where I want to be. I'm breathless when I stop. As we leave, my friend asks, "Do you want me to take your picture outside of the museum? We could send it to your dad." "Sure," I say, posing below the museum's lettering that arches across the plate glass. But then, I say, I've got something new I want to try. All right, thank you for listening. So please fill out my quiz, and I will collect it afterwards, and I would be so grateful for whatever you guys have to say. And I have your name on here, but you don't have to list your name if you don't want me to know who you are. Okay, thank you.
We all need to help her out and fill out that quiz. All right. Thank you, Madeline. Up next, Michael Skau is an emeritus professor of English at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. He studied under Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs, and Gregory Corso at Naropa Institute, and has published books of literary criticism on Corso and Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Skau has also published poems in Carolina Quarterly, Northwest Review, Paintbrush, Kansas Quarterly, Laurel Review, South Carolina Review, Hawaii Review, Texas Review, and Blue Unicorn, among many others. He was named winner of the 2013 William Clefcorn Award for Excellence in Poetry, and his collection of poems, Me and God, was published by Wayne State College Press in 2014. Please help me welcome Michael Skau.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Bonnie for inviting me to read here, and also for her efficiency in setting all of this up. As I pulled into town from Omaha today, I saw a monarch butterfly. I can't tell you how long it's been since I've seen one. We don't get them very often in Omaha. The poems I'm going to be reading are all from my collection, Me and God, and these were inspired during a period of spiritual questioning, and I was trying to discover sense and value in a world that had begun to strike me more and more as meaningless. I wouldn't dare to pretend that I was suffering from the disabling despair of a dark night of the soul, as the saying goes, but my difficulties were less like a profound helplessness and more like a nagging irritation. The God in these poems is created in my own likeness, and that means that sometimes he can be a nice guy and sometimes he can be a real jerk. And here's my trigger warning. I have no intention of offending anyone's religious beliefs through these poems. If someone is distressed by my portrayal, she or he is welcome to craft her or his own depiction of God, as people of all races, nations, and creeds have done for thousands of years. The first poem that I'll read is called Ecology, and I use the word feckless in here, which simply means irresponsible. When I flung my plastic spring water bottle to the curb, God called me an asshole. Such coarse language was rare for him, surprising me. This world is not your local dump, he snarled. Go pick it up. What am I supposed to do with it? I pleaded. Impatient, he exploded. What, are you 4 years old? You recycle it. It's just one bottle, I complained, reluctantly retrieving and crushing the empty plastic trash and tucking it into my back pocket. Just one bottle? Think of 7 billion of them. Everyone, every day, discarding just one bottle. He sneered, jabbing me in the chest with his forefinger. Okay, I told him, so put me on double secret probation. But God was on a ranting roll. A glorious world of freshness was here, and what do? Pollute the air and water, decapitate the mountains, hydraulic fracturing, and nuclear dumps. The Jordan River is drying up, the yellow Euphrates and Ganges too. Having never been near those rivers, I defended myself. So how is that my fault? The bent plastic kept clacking in my pocket. You are here to tend and sustain these gifts, but your governments and businesses lay waste to them like feckless, spoiled children, he brooded. You have a duty to put a dam on the damage they cause. None of you own the earth. You're stewards, trustees. I interrupted him. That's like giving me an allowance and then criticizing me for how I spend it. When did I agree to such an obligation? I don't even vote, so I'm not to blame for whatever those guys do when someone else elects them. Refusing to vote is criminal, he snapped. Remember this. Your vote could help elect women who might do a better job of caretaking. That's sexist bullshit, I countered, and by now I was enjoying taunting him. You'll never know until you give them a chance, he harumphed. I am an equal opportunity employer, which is more than most religions or nations can say. With my tongue planted firmly in my cheek and as much feck as I felt I could somehow muster, I stooped to pluck a soda can lying on the ground. Thank you. This one's called Wind. Me and God were heading down 18th Street, this woman walking in front of us, a full skirt on a breezy day, when a gust of wind came up and blew that skirt so high we got an eyeful of thighs and panties before she could smooth it down again, carefully pinching the slack material to the side of her leg. Wow, I said to God, did you see that? Slowed and hampered by the tightened skirt, she soon let go and resumed her stride. God turned to me. eyes a twinkle, and asked, "Want to see it again?" Some of you might know there's a film comedy, Bruce Almighty, starring Jim Carrey, who plays the title character. He's a frustrated reporter who complained about God's ineffectiveness. And so God bestows on Bruce all of his divine powers for a week. Bruce begins using this gift for personal and petty purposes, including, at one point, using his breath like that to raise a young woman's skirt. That film came out in 2003. My poem, Wind, was originally published in Laurel Review in 1980, 23 years before the film was released. This is called Beliefs, and I make a reference in the opening here to Mother Teresa, who's now Saint Teresa. Beliefs. Mother Teresa herself had doubts, God told me, as we watched the news about another graveside picket by the Westboro Baptist Church, which claimed that God punished our tolerance of homosexuals by taking the lives of our soldiers. I had just complained about these savage jackals who ravaged the dignity of coffin sorrow and mourning and made me doubt the beliefs of all organized religions. Hell, even mice can show empathy for one another. You can't dismiss them all because of this, he continued. Look at history, I ranted. Burn the maps of Mecca, Jerusalem, and Rome. Muslims, Jews, and Christians condone their battles against unbelievers. More wars were waged for religion than any other issue. I wasn't sure that this was true, but didn't let uncertainty stop me. Here they brutalized the grieving victims, and the righteous quarrel among themselves within their own isms, but still attend service almost every week. This is religion patched with duct tape and tied with wire hangers. I couldn't believe how calm and restrained he remained, so I conjured harsher terms. And aren't they all? Their beliefs are like the ingrown toenails of faith, the syphilis of human relationships. Yet this too failed to agitate him. Then, as though his composure was virulent, infecting me, I realized that someone always finally swears, "I will fight no more forever. I ain't gonna study war no more," or "I ain't marching anymore." So, despite the sorry lessons of history, I trust that someone always will. Still unperturbed, at last he whispered, "My existence does not depend on their or your belief in it." Then he approached and kissed me, smack on the lips. Some of you may realize that the conclusion there is, echoes the end of the conclusion of the legend of the Grand Inquisitor from Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. And I'll give you a little quiz here too. The three statements that I make, they're somebody always swearing to resist. The first one was, "I will fight no more forever." Does anybody know who that was? Chief Joseph, who led his Nez Perce Indian tribe 1,100 miles across Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, trying to get to safe haven in Canada. They were besieged by the U.S. military all along the way, and were finally defeated by them 40 miles from the border. And Chief Joseph then, in 1877, gave his speech of surrender, concluding, "My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." And the second one was, I ain't gonna study war no more. Anybody know who that was? That was Martin Luther King Jr. At Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1967. He concluded a sermon by saying, "And I don't know about you, I ain't gonna study war no more." And then the third one, I ain't marching anymore. That's the folk singer and protester Phil Oakes in the 1960s. That was the title of one of his folk songs and the refrain of that song too. In 1969, when the Chicago Seven were being tried for their supposed roles at the 1968 Democratic Convention, Phil Oakes was called to testify for the defense, and he recited the lyrics of that song. This one's called Mormon, and this was inspired by a controversy involving a Mormon directive that reserved the youth leadership positions in church-sponsored Boy Scout troops for the church's priesthood quorum leaders. Now, the problem is that African Americans who were denied the priesthood were denied the scout positions. When the church discovered that such racial discrimination violated scout bylaws, the church changed its directive, and according to an Associated Press release in 1974, the change, and I quote, "The change theoretically made it possible for a black to become senior patrol leader. The change did not affect the church's racial restriction on the priesthood." Church President Spencer W. Kimball says it would take a revelation from God to do that. So you see, that was like an invitation to me. Mormon. We'd been driving all night and arrived in Salt Lake City pretty bedraggled when we stopped for breakfast. The cafe was crowded, so we sat at the counter, me and God, where the service wasn't very good. Two men behind us in a booth were sipping orange juice and talking about the Boy Scouts. One of them was saying, "Well, I don't mind if one of them's patrol leader, but never for sure a priesthood quorum leader." "But if you change the Scouts," the other fellow countered, "why not then the priesthood?" "Oh," the first man answered, "we need a revelation from God himself for that." Sitting at the counter, God himself sputtered his coffee through his nose and, choking, dropped his cup. As God tried to compose himself, a waitress wiped the spill and refilled his mug. "Do you want any cream?" she asked. God, with flashing eyes, shook his head and thundered to the whole cafe, "Black!" Now there's an interesting story to that poem. The poem was published in Shadows, a periodical out of Creighton University, and the date is important, April 1978. Then, according to a United Press International release dated June 10th, 1978, and I quote, "The Mormon Church, saying its president had received a revelation from the Lord, Friday broke a 148-year-old policy of discrimination and opened its lay priesthood to blacks for the first time. On the one hand, this might seem to indicate that God had allowed the poem a moment of prophecy. On the other hand, what God did was to make the poem obsolete within 2 months. This is called Dance, and this was inspired by a line from Friedrich Nietzsche, the God is dead philosopher. In a letter to his sister, he wrote, and I translate this from the German, "I would only believe in a God that knows how to dance." So again, you see this is like an invitation. Dance. The late night radio report was depressing. Even the sport news was scandals, steroids, illegal gambling, and rape investigations. The cabin air seemed thick and close with gloom, so me and God went out for a hike. Some birds, I don't know what kind, were creeing high in the breezy night. The moon, 3/4 full, shone like an egg, surrounded by shell shards in a star-rich sky. Down below, moths were chasing the light from where I hadn't pulled the curtains tight, and were chased in turn by something dark and swift, perhaps a bat? Summer crickets squeaked as we stood in wordless wonder. Then God started swaying rhythmically back and forth, and the birds and the moon and the stars and the moths and the bat and the crickets and I paused to watch God dance to music I couldn't hear under the trembling aspen leaves. Thanks. This one's called Afterbirth. "She's eating the afterbirth," I whispered. "That's what she's supposed to do," God explained, and I watched as she gagged it down and then returned to cleaning her pup, even while the next one was popping out. "Isn't there something we should do?" I asked. "No, she's doing fine. She bit the cord down nice and close." 4 pups she bore and worried over, arranging them like pieces on a chessboard. As still another one squeezed out, she curled and lapped it. "Uh-oh," God groaned. "This one's got trouble." It was bleeding from the skull. I moved closer to get a better look, and she got tense and watched me. "It's all right," I soothed. "I'm only trying to help." "There's no help here," God said. The pup was bleeding from the skull. "What's the matter with it?" "The skull didn't seal over. Its brain's bleeding. There's not much to be done. It'll never live a normal life, even if it lives at all. You'd be best to put it away." I went outside and filled a bucket with water in the careless winter wind. Back inside, she snapped at me when I grabbed the pup, its mouth open, gaping for life, skull open too, a gem at its crest. Out in the yard, I lowered it gently into the pail and found a garden fork in the garage to dig a grave. The frozen ground would not give. It would not give. Finally, a chunk of earth turned over like a block of cement. I savaged it to pieces and reached into the bucket. The pup, bubbles blowing out its snout, curled around my hand. Horrified, I dropped it back in the pail and went inside distractedly. God watched me carefully and then got up. "You want a drink?" he asked. The bitch was eyeing me alert. I dropped onto the couch and sank my head into my hands. When God came back with 2 beers, he handed one of them to me. Thanks. This one is called Soul Making, and the title comes from a letter that the romantic poet John Keats wrote to his brother, where he said, and I quote, "Call the world, if you please, the veil of soul making. Do you not see how necessary a world of pain and troubles is to school an intelligence and make it a soul?" And no, I don't. I don't know why we need pain and suffering in order to gain intelligence and spirituality. The topic of this poem is the Sumatra Andaman earthquake in the Indian Ocean in 2004. The resultant tsunami killed more than 230,000 people in 14 countries. I also make reference in here to Jerry Falwell, the late television evangelist. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the United States, Falwell appeared on the Christian Broadcasting Network's program, the 700 Club, and blamed the attacks on God's anger at pagans, abortionists, feminists, gays, lesbians, the ACLU, and people for the American way. The program's host and fellow evangelist Pat Robertson said, "I totally concur." So this is soul making. News reports about the earthquake and its tsunami had left me shaken and angry. 250,000 lives lost, 1/3 of them children, corpses bloated, contorted like broken kites, too many for the body bags available. I lashed out at God. Why? I thought it was supposed to be fire next time. Though I doubt that any of the dead would have preferred a death by fire. Exasperated, he wondered, why blame me? You must have watched too much Jerry Falwell. What reason would I have to cause such senseless tragedy? I pleaded ignorance and cursed this planet. It's a world with bluebirds and snowflakes and the northern lights and rainbows, he countered. And I added, and floods and earthquakes, hurricanes and tornadoes, as well as cancer and heartache. He paused for a moment, collecting himself, and smiled with self-satisfaction. It's a world with penicillin and aspirin and ganja and, I cut him short, and a world where we need them. Ganja, of course, is the Sanskrit word for cannabis. Thanks. This one's called Sin. I still haven't learned to tame the tigers of the self. I once borrowed a 20 from God's wallet while he showered. I bring this up as admission, not as a confession. I never repaid him, but I've treated him to beers and even once bought him a Sonic Coney dog. Though I'm not a victim of burning guilt, I must feel remorse to still recall the episode. I've committed much worse sins, but they rarely bother me. I don't know now why I wanted the cash. It must have been for something I felt I needed then. For several days after I took the bill, I dreaded seeing God. And when I would run into him, my heart began to beat faster, and he would smile as though he knew what I had done. My conscience smolders rather than flames, as I have learned to make my own mistakes, violations of bleached commandments, for which I feel no need for penance. I never learned to genuflect, salute, or bow, and I won't assume responsibility for mistakes my ancestors made generations ago. I don't recall when I first chose to eat an apple, and I can't remember being told not to. Thanks. And this is the last poem in the book, too. It's called Roommates. I mentioned a bauble in there. Bauble is a baton that was carried by the court jester as a kind of mock scepter. And one of the things I was concerned with in here is something that people don't usually talk to us about. That is, when you end up breaking up in a relationship, all of a sudden you end up with a hell of a lot more time on your hands than you realized you would have. So this is called Roommates. After Kathy left me, I had a hard time keeping my head out of the oven. I spent my nights with imagination, a bully who kicked time in my face as I wandered through my rooms, coining lines I would spend on her the next time that we met, speaking them aloud to test their mettle. The taste was good and bitter, revising them to suit my mood. God moved in to help me cope. At first, I scarcely noticed him. Lost love, pesky as a mosquito in a tent, kept me in monologues like the fool with his bauble. But soon, even though I knew he meant well, his carelessness was scraping on my nerves. A bachelor all my life, I've never prized good housekeeping. I always found higher priorities for my time and energy. Compared to God, however, I am Martha Stewart. After a bath, he never cleaned the tub. He always squeezed the toothpaste tube in the middle and left it then uncapped. He'd cap the ketchup after licking the bottle's mouth, drink milk right out of the carton, stick a moist spoon in the sugar bowl, and let the yolk dry hard on his breakfast plate. He'd drop crumpled tissues on my ashtray, leave toenail clippings where they fell, and even drink my last beer. These are venial flaws, but I finally threw him out, though we still get together once in a while. What can I say? The dude abides. Some of you may have recognized the conclusion there as an echo of the conclusion of that great film, The Big Lebowski. Thanks very much for your patience and your indulgence.
So this handsome man is going to come around and pick up your quizzes, so if you can have those out so that I can
And Bonnie said that some of you might have questions or comments that you might want to make, and Madeline and I would both be more than happy to to address those. Just raise your hand. Madeline and I won't grade you on this.
When you're doing a sequence like, the God sequence, obviously, that becomes a book, sometimes in a sequence you're a little stuck or a little redundant, or I don't know, how do you deal with that or consider?
Yeah, what he was asking was, what do you do about when you're working on a sequence like this? Sometimes the materials can seem repetitious or forced. I think that's what you were suggesting. I can tell you that I've been working on these poems since the mid-70s. I've probably thrown out 3 times as many as appear, in the book there, simply because of what you were saying. I felt that at times that they were repeating the same motif that I had already dealt with, or that I was trying to force them to fit into a pattern that they didn't naturally fit into. So I think, in my case anyway, that what you're talking about as a likelihood actually did happen far too often for me. It's tough to give up on some of those, though, too. I keep saying, I'll go back and revise it somehow, and it'll come out better, and usually it didn't.
I'd just like to say, in your notes on the poems, the politics, I really enjoyed that segment. I apologize to whores and pimps for insulting them by metaphorically comparing them to politicians.
Yeah, when that's one of the poems in the collection there, and I compare politicians to whores and pimps. And when I read that poem to an audience, I apologize to any whores or pimps in the audience who might be offended at my comparing them metaphorically to politicians. Any others?
How long have you been presenting at events?
I'm sorry?
How long have both of you been presenting at events similar to this?
I don't know. Well, Mike's probably been reading poems in wonderful spaces like this for much more experience than me. It's quite personally. But are you asking me, tell me why you want to know?
Well, I just want to know how long you've been doing it. So it's how would you gain confidence in order to be able to start presenting?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think use it in practice a lot, and all morning I sat at home and read my essay out loud to the walls. Because you have to hopefully you don't stumble too much. You try your best, right? But you get less nervous. But right before when she was reading, I was sitting over there going, oh my gosh, stop, breathe. So you still get nervous.
I was telling Bonnie on the ride over here that when I was a teaching assistant at the University of Illinois, and I had been teaching for 4 or 5 years by this time, and before the first class, I couldn't eat because otherwise I'd be retching from the nervousness. And I went to my dissertation director and asked him, doesn't this ever stop? Is there something wrong with me about this? And he said to me, he's a very wise man. He said, Mike, I wouldn't worry about it. He said, you should worry when you stop feeling that way, because that means you don't care anymore. And I think that was a really wonderful thing for him to say. my knees were shaking when I got up here before this, even though I've read numerous times over the past 20 years or so. If you get nervous at this sort of thing, I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of at all. It comes with the territory.
Did anyone come up with a good title for my essay? Are you willing to share?
I liked your last line,
Last line of the essay?
but I don't know if you want to steal your last line and make it your title, but I thought that was it.
I'll suggest well spoke.
I was thinking something very similar. I like the idea of the spoke and the dual play on that word.
Okay, thanks very much.